My name is Jennifer L. Armentrout. I also write under the name J. Lynn. I write young adult and adult suspense, paranormal, contemporary, science fiction, and fantasy. And my most recent suspense novel that came out through HarperCollins is Till Death. And it deals with a serial killer.
Yeah, I'm Shayla Black. I was tangled in the cord. Yeah, right?
We can't take her anywhere.
I'm frightening. So I've been writing some form of suspense, either contemporary, erotic. I've even written some kind of into paranormals for about, 20 years. So enjoy what I do. My last erotic romantic suspense was Holding on Tighter through Penguin Random House.
I'm Lexi Blake. I write romantic suspense and urban fantasy. My urban fantasy, I think, is very suspenseful too. I've been writing since 2010. My latest was, oh my God, what was it? I guess it was for His Eyes Only. I write spies and spies and military people. Yay, that sounded like a real author.
Yay, make that shit up.
Arranged wasn't as suspensey, but I guess it would be arranged. Yeah.
Well, I think
Thank you.
The interesting thing about suspense is it doesn't necessarily have to be just contemporary. I think most urban fantasy and paranormal have an element of suspense or mystery involved in it. So, anybody have a question? Damn it. So let me ask you this. What draws you to write romantic suspense?
I think, it's the same thing. If you look on TV, almost everything's got an element of suspense to it. Mm-hmm. Maybe not your situation comedies, but all the popular stuff, somebody's getting murdered. I don't know why, but
someone died.
Someone died. Someone, it goes back to the very beginning of when we started telling stories. Mm-hmm. We love a good whodunit. We love to sit up late at night and try to figure out the mystery.
For me, it was Perry Mason.
I think, so I've written a couple of different things where I've done the whodunit because it's interesting and you always keep kind of that grip of conflict going through a whole book, and it's fun even when sounds funny, but sometimes when you sit down and you're like, okay, I have one of 3 suspects, and by the time I get to the end, I'll know exactly which one I'm going to choose. But it's fun even for me as I'm writing to be like, okay, it's going to be one of these 3 people and go. And I get there and I figure it out along the way also. So that's fun for me. But I also enjoy the ones where, it's more of a thriller than a suspense where you're like, okay, so you know who did it all along, but now it's the thrill of will you survive?
Are they going to catch him?
Yeah. Is he going to, or the hero's going to die or whatever. Yeah.
And I think it's the same for me. I think sometimes, I write just what I call it straight contemporary. I don't mean that in terms of sexuality. I just call it straight contemporary. But sometimes even some of my contemporary, like Stay With Me, for example, and Be With Me would have just a teeny tiny minor little suspense element in there because I think it livens up a book. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be the main plot. But I just realized I do believe this is a craft workshop. So I do have a craft question for you as I just asked that question. Do you believe, there is this belief that romantic suspense has a set formula? Meaning the book always starts with a death of some sort.
Oh, no.
Do you believe that? And do you guys know what I mean by the formula of a suspense novel? It immediately starts out with a death. The main female character is in danger. The male character is going to come in and help save her. They're going to be chased. It's time to have sex. And then it's
set your watch.
And the reason why I bring this up is because when I was writing Till Death, that was one thing my editor was like, you need to have a death in the beginning. And I was like, but no. I'm like, my character has survived she's the only person to ever survive this serial killer. And I was like, I can't progress this plot forward or this romance forward if the book immediately starts with, oh, look, people are dropping dead again. You suck. And so do you believe in that formula? And if not, do you think that you have to have that formula to make a successful romantic suspense?
I don't think I'm hard pressed to think of any book I've started with
I'm happy to hear
a death. That. I always feel like I want to write about people who are alive. I'm funny like that.
Yes.
always starting with, I like women in jeopardy stories more than I like necessarily like serial killer story for me personally, or some sort of start with the. It's one reason I know everybody gasp. I've never watched an episode ever of Law and Order or SVU or any of because when you start with a body,
stumbled across an episode
because
Where
I just
have you
don't.
been?
HGTV.
We have literally watched episodes of Wonder Woman from the 1970s
No, we have.
at 2 a.m. and
We
you've
have.
never watched Law and Order.
I have not.
You watch You Can Stop.
That's right.
I always, like I said, I prefer kind of a women in jeopardy story, or someone in jeopardy. I don't mean to be sexist, like not just woman, but somebody in jeopardy kind of story, because I think I like the tension of the person who's being chased, who's in danger, to be directly affected, not so much as like, oh, we have a dead body, let's go solve it. That's nice, but it tends to, for me anyway, kind of devolve into something more police procedural, or which is not really my thing.
Not
It's
interesting, yeah.
hard to be sexy time when you're like, hey, did somebody get that code number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to do more of like almost a thriller situation where we don't. Oftentimes you'll know who the bad guy is in my book, but you don't know why he's doing what he's doing. And sometimes the characters, and that's where POV comes in to a romantic suspense, because I think POV in a suspense plot is really important, because you can only know what these characters know. So you want the audience to be as clueless as the characters are in some cases. But I like to work with, which is funny, I think we're coming from 3 different places. I like to work with a lot of like future tech. I do some techno stuff. I read a lot of popular mechanics, popular science, stuff like that. So I'll pick something like that, and it'll be like a secret that she doesn't know she knows. And now the mad doctor's after her, and yes, they have sex in the shower. Not the mad doctor. Not with the mad doctor, though. No.
I think with me, I don't like the idea of formula to anything, because I think, but the truth is, romantic suspense as a whole, as a genre, does have a certain formula to it. And I think very much so on the traditional side versus the indie side. Like, there's certain things they look for in a romantic suspense book. But I hate the idea of being a formula, because to me, the readers then can figure out exactly what's going to happen in the first part of the book, what's going to happen in the second part. And I mean, I know in my situation, I really dug my feet in, and I was like, no, I don't want to start the book this way. Which leads me to another question. I'm sure as you guys know, or don't know, but there is a big difference between, not a huge difference, but there's a difference between a thriller and a suspense. And typically what you find is the thriller, the plot is more internal in the sense, and then a suspense, it's more external things happening that are causing the suspense. And the thriller, it can be more of a slow burn. My YA book, Don't Look Back, in my opinion, was more of a thriller, because it's not like all these crazy things are happening, is that you're trying to find out the mystery of what led to this situation.
We're writing a 5-book political thriller.
Yeah, right now.
I mean, it's very much a political thriller. It's which I know you don't see a lot of in romantic suspense, but I think with the advent of indie and those formulaic constraints coming off, you'll see a lot more stuff like we watched Scandal, and we were like, we want to do something like that, but with the bedroom doors thrown open.
Yeah. And we kind of felt like, too, the other thing is, the indie versus traditional thing, I think a lot of the formulaic feel sometimes with traditional is not so much about, because I've written so many books traditionally, but I've never been told, go write this formula or stay within this box. Like, my editor's really great about that. What I think a lot of it is when you're sort of in a word count. So if you're constantly writing books at 100,000 words, there's a way to pace that, and it ends up, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of being formulaic, even if you're not meaning to or thinking that but I think I see it a lot when you're trying to write at a certain word length. There's only so many ways to pace that, whether you are taking a more suspense angle. I think a thriller angle is almost easier at that point, because you're not keeping a whodunit for 100,000 words is really tough.
Oh, yeah. I think one thing you'll notice that's interesting about thriller is there's really no genre of romantic thriller. It does not exist. So a lot of times thrillers that are thrillers in romance, they're actually listed as romantic suspense, but they're not really typically a suspense, they're a thriller. Because you remember, the thriller is very internal. and the until usually the reveal of what's
Right.
happening, and the suspense is sometimes more external, like there's external forces at play. So when you're crafting your romantic suspense, how do you balance the relationship if the characters are now just meeting one another for the first time when all this suspense stuff is happening?
I love to do, well, I've done it both ways. Obviously, I've had two agents fall in love, but I love one of my favorite tropes is the secret agent comes in and he's basically playing the heroine and he falls in love with her. She knows something he needs to know, and it's my favorite trope. But the external forces have to force them together, and they have to kind of shove the plot along until you get to that moment where he's got to decide between his mission and her, or so I kind of balance it that way.
I like to play with. I like to play a lot with issues of trust, especially in situations where people don't know each other, and you're in this heightened situation, and there's danger, and you have to make snap decisions about who to trust now.
Yeah.
Like, I've known you 5 minutes. Can I trust you? Like, do I go off on my own? I don't know anything about this. What do I do? And so I love the idea that you find yourself in these situations where you end up sort of cleaving together because somebody's going to help somebody, and they each have strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to get out of this situation together and alive. And of course, then you have lots of opportunities to fall in love. I have to say, one of the things that I think is so funny, I've read the books where we're running, they're chasing us, they're running, let's stop and have sex. And I was like, aren't you like looking over your shoulder? I mean, I know that's complicated, but
See, that's why no.
I'm worried.
I'm gonna be quiet. It's not that kind of panel.
I just had a question about what you were just thinking about. So I want to know if you ladies could elaborate maybe on pacing, like how you go from A to Z in your book without rushing it and letting the reader enjoy the experience and the suspense without giving away too much too soon, or like peeking too soon, I guess. But how do you guys do that?
I think pacing is, that's something for any genre that you write, is probably one of the most important, other than having good characters and a good plot, because pacing can ruin a book.
Absolutely.
It can be too fast, too little, it can be too slow. I think for me, like when I do suspense, it's like I kind of approach almost all my books like this now, and I think it comes from, I don't have any experience writing screenplays whatsoever, but it's the screenplay method, which means there's 3 acts to a book.
Yep.
I do the same
Beginning,
thing.
middle,
Yeah.
and end. And
Yeah.
in a screenplay, almost every screenplay has 9 acts in each half. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that, but there's a certain amount of acts. I'm going to decide it's 9. That's what I remember hearing. But it almost equals out to be your typical chapter count, which my books are always, it's a psychological thing. It's always 32 chapters, like no matter how many words, it's always like 32 to 35 chapters. But you break it down, and that's what I do. I break them down into halves, and I know that at each point in that book, something has to have occurred in that half, whether it be the meeting or reuniting of the couple. And I also approach each of those halves as having mini cliffhangers of some sort to keep you reading. I think that is, for me, like I don't plot. Unless I'm writing a suspense, I find that I have to, just for me personally, because I don't write a suspense as much as they do. I only have a good suspense in me like once every 1 to 2 years, because it's hard. I mean, writing's hard in general, but suspense is, because you just can't wing that crap at the wall and be like, I hope it works out at the end. You didn't see the character that was introduced in chapter 29 as the killer, did you? You can't do that. So, but I break it down into 3 sections, and I know that, you basically the arc of the book has to be introduced in that first thing. Even if it's not getting a lot of screen time, there has to be something hinting towards that suspense element, whether the girl saw something at work in her boss's office that she wasn't supposed to see, but she doesn't realize that. Even if that's not an issue immediately, you got to kind of have that in there, because if not, then it looks like you kind of just
It's
threw
the
it
thing
in
they
there.
can look back on and go,
The
oh, I
red
should have
herring.
seen that.
Yeah, just Sixth Sense approach.
Right.
So you remember the movie The Sixth Sense when it flips back through
Yes.
Yeah.
and it's like, holy crap,
You
it's
should have
just
seen
in
it.
your face the entire time, the
Yes.
red herrings everywhere.
Because
Yeah.
if you do that thing where, oh my gosh, I'm going to show the killer at the last, that's not fair. This is romantic suspense. Suspense is a game.
People
You-
want to guess.
Yes, it's a game that you and the reader play, and you have to have a fair playing field.
Yeah.
You have to have it in there so that they can guess, and it has to make logical, reasonable sense that this would be the thing that happens. And I think that can sometimes be the hardest part. Now, I thought of something we should talk about. How do we deal with our characters not being too stupid to live?
Oh God, that was great.
That happens in romantic suspense all the time.
Well, and part of it, to be fair, is I understand this as a reader. You're reading along, and it's so easy to go, but that's not what I would do.
Of course you wouldn't, and
Okay.
you're not in that situation.
Right, exactly. And you do think that's what you wouldn't do in
Yeah.
the situation. And there's also the thing of like, we're writing one character at a time, and we can only write the person in front of us. So it's really hard to say, I wouldn't do that, but this is not you. Like, you know what I mean? And it's so hard because people might, in any situation, get 100 people in a room, and they might make 100 different choices at the same point.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to like, what's stupid to one person isn't stupid to somebody else. But then again, there's that whole like, we're running, we're having sex. So
I like to think, I like to admit to myself that I do a metric crap ton of stupid shit every single day. That I look back on, I'm like, I'm surprised I'm still alive. That I'm not on like the 1001 Ways to Die episode. Which, by the way, if you think it's too stupid to live, characters don't exist, literally watch Spike's 1001 Ways to Die, because there are many ways
really stupid
people out there. But I think what it is just like she said, you're not in that situation. If somebody came up to you, I mean, the perfect example is the horror movie. What does the girl do every single time that there's somebody
Hides in the closet.
Okay. But what would you do if you went to your front door and your stairways is behind you and the scream guy is coming at you? You're probably not going to be like, okay, let's do this. I'm getting through that door. You're going to be like, I'm running up those effing stairs, and then you're going to be me and get the steps and be like, oh.
I did not just do that.
Yeah. You're gonna be like, I'm literally every girl in a horror movie. Great. But I think at the same time that you do have to realize you're not in a situation. But I do think at the same time, you have to really look at the situation and notice if your character is doing. It's like, okay, you know how like in a contemporary romance where the whole entire plot is based on a misunderstanding. If those two damn characters would spend 5 effing minutes talking, the entire book would be effing over in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
You have to approach suspense. Like the person can't be oblivious to you can't have a villain who's twisting his mustache every time he talks to her, and then you'd be like,
Seriously.
really? Like that guy's bad news bears.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you write the obviously bad, because I've read these, we've all read these, where there's the obviously bad dude, and you get to the end and he's gasp the bad guy, and you're like, but I was expecting something more clever than for you to give me the obvious guy.
If y'all have read the Stieg Larsson Girl with the Dragon tattoo, at the end of that, Michael, the hero, he knows who the bad guy is. He walks into the bad guy's house anyway. He does it, and he's trying to prove a point at that moment that Swedish society, we've gotten ourselves to a place where we're so polite and so that we walk into slaughter. But I mean, it happens that too stupid to live thing does not just happen in romantic suspense.
No.
It happens in a lot of cases.
Happens in horror. It happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big phrase in the YA world. I don't know if you guys in here read YA, but that's like the biggest thing. People are like, oh, that character's too stupid to live.
Well,
And
I
it's
forget that those characters are young.
yeah, and also
Yeah.
it's funny because it's only ever referencing female characters. It's
Well, of
never
course.
referencing male
Well,
characters.
The Stieg Larsson thing,
Yeah.
that wasn't he was too stupid to live. He was making a point.
He's making a point.
Yeah.
But if you have a girl do that, oh, she's stupid. She should
Yeah.
die. You're like, wow.
Yeah, which I want to go like, as just my commentary of the day is, as a gender, why are we calling each other stupid and
Yeah.
saying that nobody gets to live? Like I'm so confused by
How
that,
many
sorry.
times should Harry Potter have died?
Oh my
just
God.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
About as many times as he got other people killed.
That's
Yes. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Run.
let's be real. Love me some Harry, but Harry was
Yeah.
like pretty much a dementor himself. But I think it's a great question. Does anybody have questions from the audience?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. Do you guys have, when you go into writing, do you have your suspense where you're gonna go with the story first, and then as you're going, you figure out who's gonna come together, or do you already know who you're gonna have come together?
Usually I know, and I say usually because every once in a while I get surprised.
Yeah.
I'll get partway through a book and I'll be like, oh, he's not the bad guy. It's happened to me a couple times, and I've actually had, in fact, with my last book, Holding Untitled, he was originally going to be a villain in a previous book, and then I got partway through that book and I'm like, he's not the villain.
But
Damn.
I like him.
But I like him.
He's just misunderstood.
Well, he also was the kind of guy who like barely opened his mouth and spoke, so he was misinterpreted a lot. He just stand there and look badass, like, I'm not having this conversation with you.
She looked at his abs and was like, no.
Yeah, like you have to live. So, yeah, it's that thing where every once in a while you get in the middle and you're like, and I tried to make him do bad guy things at some point, and he was like, no, just no, I'm not doing that. So, you know, you like to go in with a plan. Now, for us, with this 5-book arc, it's been harder because we had to really pre-plan. Like, we went away to a bed and breakfast for 4 days and said, how are we going to do this over 5 books? And
Absolutely.
how do we parse this out over 5 books? And, you know, what is the ultimate goal? And, I mean, it's a giant political conspiracy, so we had to have a huge plan before we even started. It was a lot. A lot of wine.
And lots of wine. I don't actually typically do that. She kind of drives me more into that direction.
Plot.
That's right. I'm very character driven in the beginning, which would seem weird. I do have things I know I want to write about. And in some cases that comes down to just finding the right characters who go with that plot that I want to do. I wanted to do a big old plot about quantum computing, and
I thought you were going to say Quantum Leap for a second.
that would be
Leslie
awesome.
Home.
That's right. That'd be awesome. That's fan fiction. And I couldn't find the right person to do it until I got to like book 7, and I was like, this is the girl who would have something to do with quantum computing. So I kind of come at it usually from the opposite direction.
I always know, obviously, who the couple is going to be. I tend to always know who the killer is from the beginning, or who the bad person is. Though I would love to write a book that surprised myself. I think that would just be cool. Like,
It's so bizarre.
It's
fun.
I do like to do sometimes what I call, obviously from the movie Zombieland, the double tap.
Yes.
Which means you think that's the only killer, but in reality there was more than one.
Yep.
So, and
Cardio.
I was getting ready to spoil. But I love that cardio. Oh, I love that movie. But no, I like that, and sometimes that has surprised me because you think it's the false climax where you think the book's over and everything is, we're going off now, and then they're like, no, you're not.
And you must die.
Yeah. A bunch of people had their hands up. Can you guys see? Because I can't see some of those.
Anybody else? Hands?
Yes.
I have a question about when you guys write standalones, and then anytime in the future, do you think, well, I'd like to make this into a sequel, or do you ever wish that you had made another one of the people? Because sometimes some of the people in you guys' books have small parts, but they're really, really interesting. But then we don't ever see them again. So I was just wondering if you ever.
What is standalone?
Yeah. See, Wicked Lovers was supposed to be a standalone, and it ended up being 12 novels and 6 novellas because interesting people just kept popping up. So yeah, it happens. I mean, I have tried. We've all tried probably to write standalones.
I
and
can't.
There's that person who goes, hey, you need to write about me next.
I actually started out knowing that Masters and Mercenaries was going to be 5 books.
Yeah, we had that conversation. Yeah.
I have 3
Yeah.
romantic suspense standalones. Don't Look Back, which is why The Dead List, which I keep forgetting, which was kind of my most recent-ish. And that book is more horror, I think, than suspense. I mean, it's suspense, but it's more a campy horror. It's very much in the vein of I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream, that kind of stuff, yeah. And Until Death is a standalone. And I've had readers ask me, especially in Until Death, Sasha's best friend Miranda, is she going to have a book? And I mean, sometimes I always feel, I don't know. I mean, sometimes for me, those books, 2 of them are contracted books. So I could have probably pushed for one, but I don't know. I think sometimes if it's standalone, but I think for me personally is because I don't write suspense all the time and I'm writing other stuff, that I know even if I was to do a series of suspense, they still would be like a year or so apart from one another, just so that I could actually come up with a good suspense book that wasn't dumb.
And it has to feel organic to you,
yeah.
too. Like, sometimes it's great, this is an interesting character, but I don't necessarily have a plot for you. And for me, the whole process works something like, character walks into my head and start telling me what their problems are. Well, the character might be interesting, but if the character isn't telling me that they have problems or that there's a, killer or a situation or like, I have nothing to say.
And see, I start the next book at the back of the last one.
Yeah.
I literally start, I literally end and I put
That's amazing.
Yeah, I put like the epilogue that is basically the start of the next book.
Yeah.
Well, I could think for an example for Don't Look Back, I think, because that's a one that's more of a thriller book, where the girl, the book starts with her walking down the road. She has no memory of who she is. And, she has to piece together what happened because she was with a friend when she disappeared and her friend's missing. So through the whole book, you don't know if she did something to her friend or if, and of course I introduced all these people that all of them could have done something. And there were many, I think, interesting side characters, but I guess the reason why I never did a second book, because I'm like, what is going on in this town? That, and I think, because I tend to write a lot of small town-esque books. They either take place in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, or Maryland, and I'm kind of like, what are you all drinking in that water? So that's my kind of suspending disbelief to sometimes continue something.
Like Cabot Cove.
If you go outside the formula for suspense or thriller or whatever, from a reader's standpoint, not a writer's standpoint, how much conflict is needed to make it into suspense? Does there have to be more than a bad guy? Does somebody have to be dead? Are there rules about how you jump from, just conflict into suspense, into thriller? Or
I think the rule is there is no rules.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it as suspense. I think, especially in a romance setting, can be a lot about not just suspense about a dead body or a bad situation, like a danger situation. It can also just be, I mean, if you think about it in some ways, suspense about something bad has happened and maybe nobody was hurt, or maybe it's not actually a danger thing, but something bad happened to people. Who did it? Why did they do it? Even if the angle is more angsty than danger, if that makes any sense. I mean, to me, that's a suspense of who did this? Why would somebody do this? What is the point of doing this? I'm always interested in the psychological elements of, because we've talked a lot about the fact that, okay, you have a bad guy. A bad guy with no reason is a boring guy. I don't care how bad he is.
Sure.
And there has to be some purpose to this. He has to want something. And he has to be more multi-dimensional than the guy with the mustache. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense.
And I think, too, like, there are definitely tropes. And everybody knows what a trope is, right? If you don't, it's okay, because we can explain it. Okay, go. There's definitely tropes in romantic suspense, and there's a formula, but that does not mean that there is a rule to how you write them. And you can have as many tropes, and you can follow the formula. But I think what's important in terms of that question will be the pacing of your book. Because that's going to determine how much, as a reader, that you think is conflict. Because if you have a book that's super, super, super duper long and it feels like it, then the pacing is off. It's not so much the conflict, it's the pacing of that story. Because I mean, look at I haven't read it, but like, look at the girl on the train. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot is happening in that book, right? Yeah. Who's read it? It does. I mean, it's not like it's like every chapter is like gasp. But it's a very suspenseful book. It's a thriller. So, I mean, but that's the pacing. The pacing had it like that, where even though there's not like, what is it, the game Clue?
Yeah.
The maid has been found in the kitchen.
With the candlestick and Colonel Mustard.
That's
right.
She has a question.
When you write suspense, how do you view your audience? How much intelligence are you going to give them? Because I always have an issue of, am I giving too many clues? Is this going to really insult my reader?
think there's always readers who can figure out no matter what you do.
Oh,
And they'll
absolutely.
tell you, that's the first thing they do. They go around Facebook, like,
Yeah.
I figured it out within the second
Yes.
chapter. I'm like, well, congratulations.
Sometimes the Goodreads review will come out before the book does.
Yeah. And sometimes I think you're lying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, you did not. That character wasn't even introduced in the second chapter. I know you.
Yeah.
But then you have people who are very intelligent that don't figure it out. I mean, I don't think about that. I think when I'm writing, I mean, sometimes I worry that I'm too obvious, and then I learned that I wasn't obvious enough, and sometimes I think I'm, vice versa.
Think about it. If your detective has all this information, should he have been able to figure it out? You know what I'm saying? You don't want to make your characters who are supposed to be your big bad detective look bad. It's got to be logical that there's a reason he didn't put together these clues.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and honestly, as readers, so you go into a book like this knowing you have something to solve, but you have to remember a lot of times your characters, unless you're dealing with a detective or a murder situation or something like that, they don't always know they have something to solve. They're kind of living their life and doing their thing and figuring out what's going on, and so
I got shot.
and then so they don't necessarily go, start their day with, well, here's my coffee, and now I have to figure out who's trying to kill me.
They
People
all
don't live
have
like that.
The map at the conspiracy map at the back of their.
And one thing to play off of that, one thing I'm very, if you read any of my YA especially I do this in my adult books too, is one thing I kind of have a problem with a little bit is when characters turn into Nancy Drew. When all suddenly everybody is a damn investigative reporter / detective, and I'm like, you have no training. You do not know how to find fingerprints, but you have solved this crime all by yourself. Come on now. And so that's one thing too, is for me as a writer and also as a reader, when a character kind of turns into a Nancy Drew type character, it becomes hard for me to suspend disbelief at that point, because I'm like, how are they, when you have books, especially back in the day, I think before Law and Order, that you've never watched, before people realize you just can't get into an evidence locker in a police department. You know how many books and movies where people are getting in an evidence locker? My husband's a cop. I can tell you right now, he probably would shoot you if you were climbing into the evidence locker at a freaking police station. He can't even get into it sometimes. There's a thing called a chain of custody. It's just not the mortar weapon is just not laying there. It's when you walk in, and that always,
No, really bad guys come in and steal all the evidence.
Yeah, right.
The drugs are in the back.
I have seen into one before, because this is totally random, but they had a big marijuana drug bust, and I was all I could smell, and of course I was back in my oldie goldie days, I was like, oh man. I was I just want to be but
What evidence?
What evidence? But I think, I forget what the question was.
She got up on the evidence.
I found some of that evidence.
That's right. Yes.
What do you find most challenging about writing suspense and thrillers?
Because I do, it's so funny because it's easy to second guess yourself when you don't want to, but you'll start a plot and you'll be like, this will be fun and this sounds awesome and I'm really super excited and I'm going to keep everybody guessing, and then you get partway through and it's really, you get to a point where there is a point of no return and you really can't change things without rewriting the whole book, and then you start that whole oh my gosh, what if everybody guessed? What if this is stupid? Yeah, what if it sucked?
Mid-book crisis.
Yeah, it is. And then you're and that's of course when you're I know how to cut this book short. I'm just going to get out an AK-47 and shoot everyone.
Right.
Yes.
The exit ramp. The exit ramp.
Yes.
The exit ramp.
Yeah.
But it's hard because you want to keep things interesting, and what sounded interesting to you 150 pages ago, to me, 150 pages in, then you can really start to be oh, maybe this sucks.
And you know what? That's why in the 5-book plot, we have not stuck to that plot perfectly. Mm-mm. We have come up at certain points where one of us will call the other one, bouncing up and down, going, "What if? I got it. But what if?"
Yeah.
And,
yeah. She called me the other day, and she's like, "Oh my god!" It's okay, lay it on, sister.
I just figured it out.
That's right.
I was dancing around it with a doll in my underwear, and boom.
And sometimes as you're writing along, it's you're writing and you think you have a handle on everything, and then some situation will crop up and you're and I didn't think of that. So that's kind of what's happened, especially over 5 books. We're and now we have new problems to solve.
Yes, the worst part is getting stuck in a corner.
Yeah.
It's getting stuck in a corner, and when you realize that that something doesn't work, and you literally have to make this thing work. You're 85% in. This is where you are. Unless you're going to, especially for us up here, we're on a deadline. You know, we have to scramble and figure out a way to make that damn thing work.
I think for me, it's finding the organic like gasp moments. Like you want to keep the reader on their toes. Like you want to, and that means sometimes keeping the character on their toes, and that can be the hardest for me is coming with organic, because also I look at it too, like especially if it's a murder type situation, and not all my suspense are like that, but if it's a murder situation, it's like, how often are you going to stumble across dead puppies, like, before you start questioning life choices at that point? So I
Maybe
feel like,
I should move.
Right, maybe I need to stay inside. Like, I have a really bad day.
5 of my friends are dead.
Yeah, right? Like, why is everybody dying where I go?
I think I'm going on Tinder.
Yeah, so I think that, to me, is the hardest
grand
part.
idea, right?
And that's
Let me just do
Tinder.
some swiping.
Oh my God, that would be an amazing
Right?
suspense. Like, the Tinder. Well, that's probably like the real
Craigslist.
thing. The Craigslist
Yeah.
doesn't, never mind, it's real.
The balance in romantic suspense when it comes to the hero, how dark can he be to still remain the romantic hero? Or does he always have to be the savior in that story?
There is some dark shit out
There's some
there.
dark shit out there these days.
That I have read and liked and then felt
Yeah.
very uncomfortable afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I was like, oh, baby.
Yeah. I mean, I like the redeemable person. I mean, I have a personal thing about, I always think a romance for me isn't just a journey of two people. I also love the idea that somebody has to find themselves in order to appreciate their happy ending. Because I think sometimes the reason characters aren't with somebody to start with is because they haven't learned whatever it is they need to learn in order to like be a whole happy human being. So I actually enjoy taking the person, who I just came out with a book called More Than Want You, and it's not a suspense, but it has a big plot twist at the end, but it's the same thing. He starts off as a complete asshole. I mean, he actually makes a joke at one point that he has 3 chromosomes, X, Y, and asshole. That's who he is. And he actually, I mean, it was about him learning to be in touch with himself so that he could be, a functioning partner to somebody. And so I honestly think that there's a lot of ways that you can, as long as they're redeemable in the end, I think you can get away with a lot of stuff in the beginning, especially if they have a good reason. There's nothing I hate more than, there's no reason. Yeah, exactly.
Because I can.
Because I can, yeah.
I like I tend to write. I like to write Captain America style heroes. I actually like to switch it up and write addict heroines or heroines who have gone down a really dark path and who've had to come back, because I think too often we can go those places with our heroes. Mm-hmm. We can go those places all day long with our heroes, and it's okay. Everybody loves him at the end of the day. It's harder for us to admit all of our own female flaws and to still find ourselves lovable at the end of that book.
I do believe paranormal and fantasy all has a lot of suspense in it. In my Luck series, Damon Black is the most giant asshole you ever meet. In the beginning, he has his reasons, and I still to this day am shocked when people who read the first book was like, "I love Damon." I'm like, "What is wrong with you? You need your
therapy.
mom to be like, no." I've only written one true anti-hero, and that was in the book called Obsession, and it was hard for me to write it because he pretty much, to me personally, this is not for other people, no judgy, but there's a line that I will not cross in my own books where I feel like I cannot pull a character back from that line. Like, there are certain things that I'm like, just me. And I've read other books, but there is no line whatsoever. But I think for yourself, as you establish that line of what you're willing to cross and not cross, but the only true anti-hero I ever wrote is that he only really cared about the woman he fell for. Everybody else, he literally could give 2 craps what happened to you. Like, he would just be like, whatevs. And that was almost kind of, in a weird, kind of not healthy way, his only redeeming quality. But he also wasn't human. So, yeah. So.
Yeah.
When you guys are writing a series and you take a break from that series and you write another book, is that because you guys come up with the idea and you want to take a break a little bit from the series, or because you're like editors and stuff have things that they want you to do?
I never write a series in order. I have never in my life written one book after another.
Is that what you wanna give yourself?
I'd kill every single character and every single person attached to this book in real life if I had to do that. Like, cause me, I just get too burned out on the world, and I need to step back, write something new and fresh, and then by the time I go back, I'm excited to go back to those characters.
Well, and there's the other thing too. Like, I'm juggling 4 or 5 series. I mean, we're all juggling so many series, and you might not, your fans for series A might not be your fans for series C or E, you know what I mean? And so you try to make everybody as happy as you possibly can, short of writing, 12 books a year, which is completely unrealistic, and you would hate them all because I would have spent 0 time on them. So there is a certain amount of balancing just to say, I'm focusing on these series this year, and these are the books I'm writing. And you're right, so when you get to go back to that series, you're like so excited because I've had time to think about it. And even if you're not
you like the characters
consciously
again,
thinking about it, you've been subconsciously chewing on it for a while. And sometimes when you finish a book in another series, you're like, I'm so spent, I couldn't think of another idea in this world. But fast forward, a few months or a year, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm brimming.
I tend to have a schedule of, I put out 2 Masters and Mercenaries main storyline books a year. I know when I'm going to do it. I pepper in the rest of it around that because I like to be very routine in when I release books. You're going to get one in February, you're going to get one in August. And then I like to shift and do we do our political thriller.
Which is called Perfect Gentleman. We never have said that.
What's it called?
Perfect Gentleman.
Oh, I like that.
I've got an urban fantasy, which it's so easy to, it's like clearing the palette because it's utterly different. It's in first person. You just started writing in first person. It's a very different experience.
It is a really different. I wrote first person all male. The entire book is from his point of view, which was really super interesting because I grew up with dudes, so dudes are really easy for me. Like, that's all day long. I can think like guys, so it's fun.
I write in first person in certain books and certain genres, and then in my adult suspense and romance, I tend to write in third person. Except for new adult, I'll do that in first person. So I flip back and forth. But
do you like to do the back and forth as far as like how they're doing it now with the male in one chapter and the female?
I try to have them both in each chapter. Sometimes the pacing or the plot doesn't work for that, but I try to give them an equal amount, which sometimes can be very frustrating. But I'm like her. Like, I like to write, especially for my YA stuff. I like to do male POV sometimes because in YA teen girl POV, everything is very internalized, introspective. So you'll have paragraphs and pages of like internal dialogue, and
does he like
yeah, and then the dude is like, that sucks.
My
I want
life
some
is
popcorn.
over.
Like they're not gonna sit and think about this. I mean, they're gonna be impacted by it, but I come from a psychology background, so females internalize, males tend to externalize, and so where they tend to go do something to occupy, while females tend to not to. So I like to write sometimes more in the male POV, except for when it's a suspense, because I sometimes like to make it where even sometimes the male lead is a suspect. Yeah, because there's a certain sexy danger to that would not be sexy in real life, but
this is fantasy.
No, I'm not getting naked with you, but in
I think you killed people or you're blackmailing me, so let's have sex. But that's one thing we haven't actually addressed, which was the thing of this panel, is how do you balance the sex and the suspense? Because one of the biggest complaints that you'll see, and one of the biggest compliments that you will get as a romantic suspense author is, oh my God, when you wrote your sex scene or your love scene, I wasn't thinking the whole entire time. What? Like, people are dying around you, the sky's falling. How did you have time to have sex? I mean, but also on the same book that I've had that compliment, I've had the opposite said. Yeah. Which is, I can't believe they were having, that they found time for this. So how do you, for your own personal writing, how do you balance and make time and make it seem like an organic?
It has to make sense.
It does.
It has to make sense. And I've done some where I'm specifically thinking of one book where I had a beta reader come back and say, there's no way they have sex here. And so I actually built in, we have to stay in this room We have to be in this room for an hour and a half. We know they're listening to us. We don't want them to know that we have caught on to them. So what better way? They've been listening to us have sex for 3 weeks. What better way to make the bad guy think we don't know anything than, hey, let's have sex?
I like to build in.
There you
I
go.
like to build in periods.
They have to do it for their country.
That's right. There's a song about that.
Right.
I like to build in like almost what I'll call rest periods where they think they've got away, they can't be found, they go someplace underground. Like they have that reasonable belief that nobody can find them. Or I like also the false climax where they think the bad guy's been caught, so like there is no danger, let's celebrate. And either one of those situations I think work really well. I'm not a huge fan of we have 10 minutes in the car driving down the road, go.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're stuck in a hotel room, what do y'all do in a hotel room? Come on.
Well, maybe not this week, but
Are you guys filming?
no. It's okay.
I think for me, too, one thing to keep in mind is I'm going to come from a psychology background. And I think sometimes we as writers and readers forget this. When people are experiencing very traumatic events and very scary events, it's actually a biological and chemical reaction to an experienced life. People become more risky, and people actually make less than wise decisions after having experienced something fully traumatic or seen something. It's like it's almost the same thing where it's the flight or fight response. It's like that. So a lot of times where you think that it's unreasonable, but they'd be having sex, but actually psychologically it's not, because they want to forget. They want to experience life. They want that pleasure, the pleasure principle. They don't want to think and feel everything else. So sometimes the impromptu sex is actually psychologically makes sense.
It's like people.
Yeah.
It's like people who say that they went to somebody's funeral and they come home and have sex.
Yeah.
It happens a
They
lot.
want to be
and
alive.
It's
Yeah.
that sort
They
of
wanna remind
celebrating
themselves,
life thing. Yeah.
That they're alive.
Well, and when you feel so disconnected from everything else, don't you want to connect to something?
Yeah.
And that's his penis.
Because when you're talking about third and first persons, when you're writing it, how do you flick from one to the other? Because if I've got one series that is in third person, I just started writing one in first person, and if I go from one to the other, it's like the first 3 chapters I've got to go rewrite because I screw up every second paragraph.
I only write one book at a time. So for me, I don't do this flip-floppy thing. I'm a very linear, because I have to go through the emotional process with the characters.
But when you first start,
Yeah.
So if you've done the third person and then you've moved on and now you're starting the first person, how do you kind of clear your head and get into the first person?
For me, so here's what's funny. So when I started writing my More Than Words series, which just came out, I sat down and I didn't even know that I was going to write it in first person, and furthermore didn't know I was going to write it first person present tense from his point of view. It just was like this, like he started talking and I started typing, and the next thing I knew, I'm like, I can't write this in any other point of view. This was the only way this story was going to come out. So for me, it organically grew out of, okay, so I guess here we are with Maxon, and he's going to tell us why he's an asshole. Yay.
I think for me is I've done it so many times now, it's like habit, but I will say the first couple pages sometimes it's a little rough because I find myself wanting to use the wrong pronoun. But also I only write certain genres a certain way. So like YA is always going to be first person past tense. I cannot do present tense. But the thing is, when I read present tense, y'all mess me up when I'm writing because then I flip tense like
I
immediately
didn't think
in the
I
book.
could do it either,
Yeah.
but I did. Because I had a long conversation with Julie Kenner about it. I'm like, dude, how do you do that? And then all of a sudden
hard.
I was like,
present
okay.
tense is hard.
It was
'cause,
weird.
yeah, that takes talent that I do not have. But I also, so certain genres for me dictates what POV I'll write in. So that helps me too.
Yeah.
I only write when the only time I write first person is urban fantasy, and it's always the female point of view, and it's always the heroine, and I will spend 5 books with that heroine, so it's really easy because that's her voice.
Another question? Oh, there.
Have any of you been to that cop school for writers?
SWAT Academy.
I have not.
No, I just call my husband and ask him. And it's always like the start of a really awkward conversation because I don't ever tell him what I'm working on. So I'm always like, if you were suspected for murder, how would you handle this? And then he's so stupid sometimes because like he'll be working And like, seriously, if I murdered someone, am I gonna call you while you're working in your cruiser? And he's like, let me call you back. And then he gets out of his cruiser, which is funny because they have body cameras. So he gets out of his cruiser, and then he calls me on his personal phone because I mean, it's so dumb. I'm like, what, do you really think I'm calling? Like, I literally just murdered someone. But
I married a while. You're still alive.
Yeah, but I appreciate that you're trying to hide it.
I don't know. I've watched a lot of Dateline, and sometimes that happens.
Yeah, true. Whenever I travel for some reason in hotels, I only ever make it to, I think it's Headline News Channel, and I stop because they show Forensic Files from like one point in. So I'll go to sleep with Forensic Files playing, which does sometimes you hear some weird stuff. But Forensic Files is like I think one of the best shows to watch if you read suspense and you think things are unbelievable, because I have watched so many episodes of Forensic Files and gotten so pissed off at the killers, not because they killed someone, but because they wore the same damn shoes with the blood splatter on it that they killed someone into the interrogation. And the detective's like, so can I see those shoes? And you know, I'm like, how dumb can you be? Like, to do that.
She calls me sometimes after having watched way too much IDTV.
Oh, I love it.
And
That's
she was like,
discovery.
oh my gosh,
Deadly
did you see
Woman.
this? No, I didn't
I will
see
watch
this.
so much that I'll go in and I'll start a dream and I'll hear like, Dateline, Texas. And I'm like, no, wake up. This is bad.
Which is why I'm watching HGTV, because I'm in my happy place.
Right.
And it's decorated, damn it.
Decorate the body.
That's what we do. I kill them, she decorates the houses.
One of my favorite investigative discovery shows is Deadly Women.
Yes. Oh, I love that. No,
that one has actually made me cry sometimes. Has choked me up. Like some of the the mothers that kill ones, or the things that I just.
See, I like the one with the creepy dude, and he'd always talk, and he's really lurid, and it's the one behind mansion walls or whatever.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's like the guy who's illegally doing plastic surgery.
Yes.
Yes. It's like the same episode every time.
And I'm always like, that's like the super wealthy killing each other, and I'm like,
ones,
okay, that's interesting.
I didn't know what happened to me.
Have you based any of you on your husbands, spouses, any of your books or characters?
No.
Everybody is looking at me.
As we all know.
Yes. Yeah. I do a lot of that. I might write down the things my husband says in a day. And they might go in a book, because my husband is the most sarcastic bastard who ever walked.
So we have this sort of running joke where, I always say, when people say, describe your husbands, and I'm like, mine is Captain America. He will always do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Anybody who knows my husband knows this is true.
Mine is Satan.
Yes. And yet somehow we all get along, so it's so fun.
I had this, I like to call it, I had this conversation with him the other day, and y'all will see this in a book soon, coming soon. I literally take the words, my main character in Masters of Mercenaries is a sarcastic bastard as well. His name is Ian Taggart. And I just get the dialogue from straight out of my husband's mouth. He likes to say that it's time to introduce himself. When things he'll be a nice guy, and then he's like, okay, it's time to introduce myself. And that's when I hear him on the phone talking to the cable company, and he's like, no, I don't want free HBO. I want a human soul. That is the only thing that will satisfy me at this point.
It's totally not a joke. I've heard this conversation.
Yes. And I'll look at him and I'll say, you are you're a horrible human being. Why are you doing? He's like, baby, I know what I don't say. I'm a great guy.
I don't base any of my characters on my husband. I do, I obviously have learned stuff from him, from work and things like that. But I do base it on conversations I hear of people. Sometimes you have, somebody who says something really funny. You're like, I warn them. I'm like, I'm totally stealing that. That's going in a book. But I think all authors do write some of the people they know into something. Yeah.
I feel like I write an amalgamation of people. So I grew up so much with, my grandfather and my uncles and my male cousins, and they were all, very alpha dudes. And so I don't know that there's any one person that I would say I modeled character after, more that I've written a whole slew of heroes who I think could go sit and play poker with my family.
I have literally written her in a book.
You have.
I
It was
did.
mean. I have no
I-
spleen
oh,
left,
God.
damn it.
You live. You live.
She
and I
took my
gave
spleen
you-
out with a knife. I'm just saying.
I didn't do it. The bad guy did it.
Oh, please.
Now I've done that. I've written my author friends into books, but I only do it when they die. So if you like
Larissa E.O., you
Yeah.
are horrible.
Yeah, like in my Wicked book, like literally all the dead people that are listed at the beginning are all author names.
See, I
The
died
trick
twice.
is I took last names from different authors. So like instead of Cora Carmack, it was Cora Jordan, and then Sophie Jordan was Sophie Carmack, and so that's what I did to the
It's fun to kill your author friends.
Uh-huh.
But I gave you had a happy life, and I gave you a baby.
Wow.
No, yeah. Well, I warned them like, oh, I told you.
That's
in the
a whole
book.
like
And they're okay.
headline right
That's a
there.
whole other. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a headline right there.
She's on her third fictional baby.
Which character?
Bridget.
I'm Bridget.
She's not really on her third.
So the person who swears at everybody who drives because they can't drive.
And drinks Diet Coke like it.
I read those. It was the fourth reread of the book before I worked at Chris. Was like Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
So we have time for like one more question. So yeah.
How do you schedule your writing? Is there times of day where you sit down and must do it? Is it more haphazard? Do you have families you're trying to balance at the same time?
I try to be super disciplined about it. I try to write 3,000 words a day. I'm a morning writer. My husband came home he retired about 2 years ago. So
right before mine did.
Yeah, so he takes care of. I pretty much work full time, and he takes care of all the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. Mine came home in November of 12, kicking and screaming, I might add, but he's happier now. I think it's the kind of thing where, see, and I'm not a morning person so much. I've turned into like the night person, so I'm the person who's still up at like 1 in the morning going, hey, who's writing? And I don't even know, because sometimes I'll wake up to do, kind of admin or other things that I haven't done, and that's sort of as I'm drinking something to wake up. And then I'll phase into writing, and then I tend to write more like midday, and then I'll skip some afternoon, and then I'll write again in the evening and into the night.
I'm done by 5.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch it again at 5.
I have a set. Usually, sometimes I'll do word limit, or I have to write a chapter a day. So I just write until I get it done. But I usually get started writing around 12, 1 o'clock. And my husband has to have a job just because I could never get a book done if he was home. Because in the days, because he works 10-hour shifts, so the days he's off 3 days and he works 4 days, and those 3 days are my least productive days, like, because he's just like, what are you doing? And you're like, oh my God, what does it look like?
I won't see mine because I've still got an 8-year-old, but I want that 8-year-old to have a T-shirt that says "Raised by Dad," so they don't think I did that.
Yeah.
See, I recommend. I bought mine a PlayStation.
See, and I don't have them.
Yeah.
And if I did have them, I don't anymore, because I would not be paying attention to them whatsoever remotely. And I think that helps for terms of writing a lot and getting a lot done, is when you don't have kids. I'm not responsible.
No, I'm saying for your husband.
Oh, no, he has one.
Okay.
He just roams like upstairs. He runs into the office, and then you know what he does? He talks to the dog. And I'm like, can you please stop talking? And he's like, I'm not talking to you. I'm like, you're talking to the dog. It's like laying right next to me. I'm like, come on. But it's I think that helps, though. I mean, I do applaud writers who have children. I don't know how they get anything done.
For my husband, he's a talker to the dog, and he'll talk to the dog like he's really trying to converse with me. I finally had to buy the goggles that Amazon Prime, they delivered them the same day because I live in Dallas. Anyway, that people who do jackhammering, they wear, so I put those over my head, and I literally can't hear anything.
Oh my God.
It's like this. I'm okay.
I invested in some really good Bose earbuds. And I write to music like constantly. I'm such a musical person, so I'm constantly, like, I have Pandora streaming all the time. I'm like, play me random songs, I like it. And I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing. So when my husband walks by and says something, can't hear you.
See, I used to leave my house and go to an apartment. but we bought a new house and it's got an office, and so I thought that would be okay. The office has the beautiful French doors that have the little windows, and the kids know not to come by and try to. But my 8-year-old puts her little face up there. I'll turn around and she's just standing there.